In 2012, 7 players sat down to play a board game, not knowing that it would take 3 years, 7 months, and 10 days to finish the game. It took 103 in-game years and 309 turns to resolve this Web Diplomacy World Cup final. Today, we're talking with the Austrian player to find out why this happened, here on Legendary Tactics. Before we speak to Goldfinger about this game, I better give you some context. Diplomacy has been around since 1959, and a recorded game that lasted this long has never happened in this 63-year period. It takes some fairly exceptional conditions to allow this to happen. The game needs to really matter. All the players at the table need to be both extremely dedicated and also very skillful. If anyone makes any mistakes, then all the lines will break and the leader will get their 18th center. Now, to win, a player must get control of 18 centers. You also need to know that diplomacy, like chess, allows for stalemate scenarios, where both sides have 17 centers and neither can breach the other's line. The game is consciously designed this way so that players will be forced to make alliances to prevent the board leader from winning. However, if the players left at the table agree to a draw in a tournament like this one, the player with the most centers when the draw is called is said to have topped the board. A huge thank you goes out to Captain Meme, who has graciously shared with me all of the hard work he's done on this game. We'll chat with him later in the video as well, and also link to his wonderful in-depth look at the game. I'd like to welcome Goldfinger to the channel now, and I really have to say, I respect your tenacity in this game.
Thank you. It took a lot out of me and many years out of my life.
Wow, yeah, so over 3 years of play, so you must have come to know some of the other players in one form or another. Can you tell me about your opponents and if any of them ever needed to have a replacement take over throughout the course of the game?
Yeah, over three and a half years of play, you do get to know people quite a bit, and you get to know their quirks, and we developed a sort of camaraderie throughout the whole gameplay. We did need to have a couple people sort of fill in because there was some attrition as time went on. The first one was Turkey, about I think it was like 10 years into the game or 10 game years into the game.
Right.
So they were pretty much a non-factor. But Italy actually was replaced about, I want to say, the mid-1960s in the game. So that was probably 2 years in real life. And that really did impact the flow of the game in a great way.
Absolutely. And Italy was the real wild card in this game because they were the only one in whose interest it was to draw. Am I correct? Yeah.
The reason why this went on as long as it did was there were a number of powers that needed different results to win the tournament. The game was part of a larger tournament that had teams competing. And I think it was that team aspect that kept people going because they weren't just playing for themselves, they were playing for themselves and a bunch of friends. So yeah, I think Russia needed a solo win. I think Germany needed a solo win. And that really kept the game going as long as it did.
Right, so everyone was highly motivated to get a solo, except for Italy, who just needed the draw.
Yep, and it did help that Italy was the one on the ropes for most of the game. And when the new Italy came in, they changed the direction of that country. And once they became the sort of the predominant power of the board, everyone else sort of saw the writing on the wall. But even then, it took 20 or so years for it to finally wrap up.
I can't wrap my head around this. It's just insane. But some people might wonder why a tournament would let a game run for so long. So can you tell me why the tournament director didn't just call an end date? I mean, this was a championship game. And also, I'm wondering what the prize was for winning. It must have been really, really great for you guys to play for over 3 years.
Yeah, so I was actually the tournament director for this. So you could call it a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's fair.
For letting this run on, and certainly the community decided that there should be limits in future games so that this does not repeat itself. But the prize was pride.
Yes.
at emerging from this slugfest as the sole victor.
Thank you. I understand that the game was set to 2 days per phase, and I'm really curious how much time you invested in this game on a daily basis and over the course of 3 years. This will be a rough estimate, of course. And I know that when I play games over the course of 2 or 3 months, I get really tired of, checking my moves every single day and, the puzzling out what's going to happen. Were there times when the game needed to be paused or times when people missed inputting orders or you just felt tired of the game?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that tiredness just comes with the course of something going on for as long as it did. There were pauses that happened, because of holidays or birthdays or whatever. So we did have little breaks here and there throughout the game. But it did get a little tiring. But with the 2-day phases, it wasn't exhaustive because you had a bit of time. You didn't have to think about it on a day-to-day basis. So on a day-to-day, I probably, whenever I was in on the website that it was hosted on, doing something else, I would write a few messages, and really it didn't take up too much time. As the years stretched on, it just became this sort of background thing, part of your everyday tasks.
A third reason why the game might have taken so long is as you mentioned, the press there. It was public press, and I see by the logs that there was a lot of press going back and forth. Would you agree that this makes stabbing players much harder, and consequently, I imagine progress would be slower and steadier rather than sudden?
So definitely, public press did contribute to the length of the game in several ways. One is that in a regular press game, you see like messages from one or two people, but like if other conversations are happening, you don't get to see that. In public press, everything's out there. So there was always when you logged in, someone new sending a message or something. There was more activity to get you engaged in the game. But yeah, it also draws things out because it makes things very hard to stab, because you have to either develop very good doublespeak, which most of us learned to do, or just be able to sort of intuit what the other person was going to do based on their past actions, which as the game dragged on, we all became much better at doing as well. So stabs rarely came as a surprise. And we're coordinating against a solo push, for example, was much easier because you're able to do it right out in the open.
Wow. Yeah. So that actually adds a whole new dimension to the game that I'd never considered. The fact that you might be speaking on two levels, the one where your opponents are reading it, and then almost an allegorical or subtextual level where you're trying to sneak in a message unconsciously to your quote unquote allies. So that's a really cool twist to the game. Were there ebbs and flows with the press, or was it fairly continuous?
I'm with any game that goes on this long, there were ebbs and flows. There were years where, not much coordination was needed between sort of the coalition of powers if there was a solo run. I would say that the most conversation happened in those, contentious years of will they, won't they stab their ally. So that's when most of the talking happened. Otherwise, it was just, you coordinate. I need you to move here to, block this fleet in the north. And a lot of times, because the moves were out in the open, we were just like, I trust you know what to do here. So the conversation didn't.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's skilled players, so yes, people know what they need to do and when they need to do it. I mean, it's just incredible to keep a game going this long. The dance that you had to perfect. But I'm actually looking right now at the map for winter 1921, and I see that Italy is down to a single center. I see you as Austria sitting at one unit as well. And in fact, Italy has lost all of his home centers. And you have a lucky retreat option here. I noticed in 1922, and you luckily slip into Budapest, which is open. And I have to say that this game must be one of the best comebacks in the history of gaming. Spoiler alert here, because we fast forward to spring 2005. Italy has 13 centers. He's topped the board, while you end the game with the second most centers at 8. And I know some people don't value second most centers, but I sure do, because you fought back from like almost nothing here. And one thing I always say is a chip in a chair, right? You get one unit on the board, you're always in this game. But why didn't either of you get eliminated sooner? Or perhaps I should say, what diplomatic secrets can you share with us that kept you breathing, or maybe that kept Italy breathing? I mean, did you pitch a vassal state here, or what happened?
Yeah, so I was hoping this would be an even greater comeback of all time with me topping the board, but it didn't come to pass. I'd say each of us lived for different reasons. In me, for that case, I had pitched myself as a vassal to Russia.
Okay.
And I lived on and off in that state for much of the 100 years or so of the game, in sort of a love-hate relationship with Russia. But the good thing about Austria is Austria has Trieste, where you can build fleets on the Adriatic.
That could be valuable.
And Russia, for most of the game, was bottled up behind Constantinople. So I was an outlet for Russian proxy fleets to be built and pushed out against Italy. And to a certain extent, Italy was kept alive as well because they could push out fleets, be it against France or later Germany, when Germany was making their own solo push. So we had our usefulness to the main powers that be. But for much of the early game, it was Russia, France's show, and everyone else was just dancing along.
Wow. Okay. Well, I respect your tenacity. It's amazing. Do you secretly wish that you had been eliminated there now that it's all over and you spent that much time on the game, or is this a source of pride that you managed to stay in it?
Oh, I absolutely like that I was able to stay alive. It's a good story to tell. And we all tried, like, after it got to a certain point, we all tried to keep each other alive as long as possible. I know I tried to keep Turkey around, but was ultimately failed somewhere in the 1930s, I think.
Yes.
If my memory serves me correct.
There was one other moment I wanted to focus in on. Russia had 17 centers in winter of 1964. How close was he to ending the game then? And how did you stop the solo?
Oh, that was a coin toss. It just came down to some lucky guesses on the part of the coalition that formed against him.
But is it luck or was it skillful outguessing?
It will be whatever you want it to be in this case. I attribute it to luck. I don't want to give myself too much credit because sometimes that really all it is. It's a coin toss.
Modesty plays well with our viewers, so thank you. So the ending must have been bittersweet after playing for so long. And that's one of the critiques of this game, I think, is that you play for over 3 years and end in a draw, right? So what brought this game to its conclusion? And tell me a little bit about your emotions when the game ended.
So I was playing a little game of my own with the draw button. So the game ends when all the players vote draw, and that's publicly known who is voting draw. So for a long time, everyone except Russia had voted draw. Germany and myself were doing this under diplomatic pressure from Italy, who was at our backs, who obviously wanted the game to end so they could win the tournament. And Russia was the holdout. And I played the game a little too long before removing my vote. And Russia, I'd taken too much of their territory. They didn't think they could come back, pull the one center to topping the board miracle. So they tossed in the towel and it ended. It was a little bittersweet. I immediately after, I wished I had played it a little differently, but
what would you have done differently in the end?
Oh, I would have probably removed my draw vote and muscled up to face Italy, keep the game going another 20 years or so.
Push it longer. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've safely got the record in hand right now. I doubt anyone will at that level continue to have games that long. So lots of respect to you there. Are you still playing Diplomacy, or did this experience make you more cautious about joining a game?
I do still play. I will say I don't play as much as I did 7 or 8 years ago when this game took place. I will say that, but I do play here and there in tournaments on the Nexus online diplomacy leagues. So yeah.
So after being invested in this game for a very long time, you must have picked up some strategy points. Can you share any of your thoughts that changed over the course of this game?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I learned a lot about how to conduct moves and coordinate moves without openly doing so in a public press game. We used a lot of probabilities. So, we'd communicate, say, hey, Germany, 50-50, I will do this move. 50-50, I'll do this other move. You do what you think I will do.
Wow, okay.
So there was a lot of sort of ways to communicate moves like that. But I think in terms of diplomacy tactics, there was a lot that was learned as well. So I think the most comparable version of diplomacy to this public press would be gunboat diplomacy, where there's no communication whatsoever. So I do feel it helped my gunboat game quite a bit.
And what do you love most about the game of Diplomacy, and why do you play this game?
I'd say it's a good community. The community I was on that drew me in had a very active forum. a lot of well-educated people speaking on interesting topics. And generally, you don't get to connect with players in many other games the same way you do in a game like this, that so much relies on your persuasiveness and your ability to have a good conversation with somebody.
Yes, I find Diplomacy probably the most emotional game that I've played, and those are both good and bad emotions. But you learn to manage the bad emotions.
Yes. A lot of keeping the anger hidden inside. Don't let them show that they've hurt you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Goldfinger. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you. You too.
We have one last treat for our viewers before we conclude. I'd like to welcome Captain Meme to the channel.
Hi there.
Pleasure to have you here. And you have spent quite a few hours analyzing this game. I believe your videos clock in around 30 hours worth. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just a mild bit of insanity. Absolutely. But have you ever seen a game like this or heard about a game like this before?
Not in Diplomacy. Like, once I took a look at, this game was something of a legend on WebDiplomacy at the time. When I heard about it and, started to look into it, so I went around and asked people, what's the longest game you've ever heard of? The longest one anyone could come up with was like 1960 something, I think, and even that was Gunboat. So for 4 players to play this long with press, it was just absolutely insane.
Well, and at a competitive level too. It wasn't like just a bunch of friends goofing around who weren't really trying and everyone's missing their moves.
Exactly, yeah. It was a World Cup final. It was just like everything. The stars aligned for this game. It was a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I can't picture anybody else putting in that much time to a game like over 3 years. It's insanity. But so I'm looking at your spreadsheet that you put together too, and the game looks like it was a ballet of power swapping with different dancers coming to the front of the stage at different times. What stands out to you when you look at the shifts in power across the whole game?
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what Diplomacy is, right? Because at its core, if you're trying to win a Diplomacy game, you have to try and keep all the other powers level and even and fighting each other. Otherwise, you run into a stalemate line and, you get stopped, and that's where the game ends usually. This game was just beautiful to watch in that respect, and you can see it with all the lines going up and down, up and down, up and down. The way people approached it was, if I get near a solo but I don't make it, maybe I'll drop back a bit, maybe I'll let someone else get stronger, then take that opportunity to go back in and try and solo again. And they just kept doing this. It was absolutely incredible. The only person who had any reason to try and stop that was Italy, because they would have won if the game had drawn. And they just didn't gain enough power to stop it for that amount of time. This really shows off what can happen if everyone is absolutely 100% playing to win.
Yes, and this is how the game is designed too. This is how it's meant to be played.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole stalemate line thing, I don't think was part of Alan Calhomer's original design. It was just something that popped up when afterwards and sort of got co-opted into it when people figured it out. This is kind of what he envisioned in the first place. Everyone just constantly battling it out and trying to take down the biggest power. And actually, there's a couple of interesting things that certain powers do in this game. I won't spoil it completely, but like the Russian, for example, they put a huge focus on Turkey, they put a huge focus on Scandinavia. And when Russia usually gets attacked in a Diplomacy game, they try and turtle up in the middle. They try and defend Moscow and Warsaw, because if you're on a stalemate line, that's where you want to be. That's where you're most likely to survive.
And you want to consolidate your forces so you're not battling on 2 fronts.
Precisely, absolutely. You don't want to be completely separated, because then, if you have to defend something, you can't get the units there. But this Russia was absolutely determined, I will not let this go to a stalemate. So I will keep forces in the south, I will keep forces in the north, I will abandon my center if I have to, and then I'll try and collapse back in later and regain it. In the meantime, I need to make sure no other power gets enough power to win or to force a draw, so I need to keep units on both fronts. It's just fantastic.
It's beautiful. Now, would you say there's any other strategic principles that Diplomacy players can learn about this game by watching this? And you've got tons and tons of analysis, so they can watch turn by turn all of the plays. But any overall concepts that we might learn?
Absolutely. I mean, balance of power is the number one thing, right? And maybe number two is also, so balance of power, first off, if you're playing diplomacy, you do not want someone else to gain control of the board. If you're playing as Turkey, it's very easy to say, I'm playing Turkey. I only need to talk to Russia, Austria, and Italy. I just focus on my side of the board, let the West do their thing. And then, halfway through the game, you're attacking Austria. You're going, yeah, I might be able to get a win. And suddenly England solos, right?
Yes.
You need to focus on what's going on. You need to negotiate with powers on the other side of the board, tailor your play to how those powers are playing as well. And try and make sure no one is growing faster than you. Because even if you're growing fast, you can be outpaced. And the second thing is just never give up, right? I think we heard earlier from Goldfinger about those years where Italy was at one supply center, Austria was at one supply center. And Italy essentially won this game.
That's right.
After being down to one supply center, with that supply center being in Trieste.
Yes, he didn't even have it. He couldn't even build units.
Yeah. It was incredible. And then I believe they pitched themselves as a vassal. The other powers picked them up on that because they wanted to, try and keep this balance of power going, and managed to work their way back into the game. And that's a fundamental principle of diplomacy. You can always make your way back if you're never dead until you're completely dead, right?
That's right. Well, the other thing that surprises me with this game is that normally you get so angry at somebody who hasn't done what they'll say they will do that you just want to throw them the game, or just there's usually these kind of holdover revenge plots, and that didn't seem to happen here. People were always willing to come back to the line and to hold it against the leader of the game.
Yep, that's another very key thing. And honestly, a lot of top level diplomacy players, they will still throw games. They won't do this. They'll go, I'm going to preserve my reputation as someone who will punish you for a later game by throwing this game here. But these players all cared enough about this game that they were all going, no, I'll do anything I have to do. And that involves making up with someone I hate or who has stabbed me or whatever. They kept going. They put their best interests ahead of any kind of personal feelings they had towards each other, and resulted in a really epic game.
It really did. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on the game, and also for sharing all your hard work with us.
All right. Thank you for having me, and thanks for covering this game.
No problem. Well, hey, if the people are still watching this video, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please stab the like and subscribe buttons now. Also, go on over to Captain Meme's channel, Diplostrats. It's great, and you can see a full breakdown of this game, a turn-by-turn analysis. Marcus is a real pro, so check out his videos and go like and subscribe to his videos too. I'll link to those now, and thanks so much for your time.